I died with her name on my lips. I remember the silence that followed, so loud, it drowned out everything else. No monitor beeping. No nurses rushing. Just, nothing. And in that stillness, all I could think about was her face, the way her eyes used to avoid mine when the truth got too heavy to carry. Amara. If you're hoping this is some dramatic story where I come back to life and everything turns out fine, stop. This isn't that kind of tale. This is about what happens when love isn't enough. When fear wins. When silence becomes betrayal. And how sometimes, people realize what they had, only after they've buried it 6 feet under. She told me once, in the quiet of a university hallway, if things were different, I'd choose you. But things weren't different. They were exactly what they were, her family's legacy, her arranged marriage, her need to do what was right, not what was real. And I was the mistake she didn't have the courage to make. The world saw her as perfect. Beautiful, obedient, the ideal daughter. But I saw her in the in-betweens, when her hands trembled holding mine, when she turned away just before I kissed her, when her lips quivered like they wanted to scream but her mouth only ever whispered apologies. I kept loving her anyway. Because that's what you do when your heart's foolish and your hopes addicted to maybes. But the truth is, she didn't fight for me. She watched me bleed in silence, emotionally, then physically. And by the time she came back, begging for forgiveness, telling me she loved me, I was already dying. And I'd made peace with the truth, some people only learn to love you when they've lost the version of you that needed them the most. So why am I telling this story? Because someone needs to hear it. Someone out there is standing where I stood, waiting, loving, breaking quietly. And maybe my words will be the reason they stop waiting for a love that's too afraid to stand beside them in the daylight. My name is Zion. This isn't a love story. It's a story of almost everything. Of what-ifs. And of the revenge that comes, not from hate, but from leaving behind everything that once made you beg to stay. Now, let's begin. I've always believed that love, when it's real, doesn't need to announce itself. It hums. It lingers in the quiet. It knows your name without needing to shout. That's how it felt with Amara. Even before she returned to my life, she lived in the back of my mind like a half-finished sentence. We weren't strangers when we met again, we were something far more dangerous, two people with history and no closure. I still remember the exact moment I saw her again. We were both reaching for the same book at the university library, one of those poetic coincidences that would have made me laugh if my heart hadn't stopped. Literally. My fingers grazed hers, and before I even looked up, I knew. Zion. Her voice cracked just slightly. She wore a lavender scarf wrapped around her neck, my favorite color on her, though she never knew. Her smile was cautious, like she didn't know if she had the right to use it around me. We'd known each other as children. Same neighborhood. Shared bus rides. Secret glances during Eid gatherings when we were too young to name what we felt but too aware to ignore it. Back then, we promised stupid things, like running away together, or getting matching tattoos of stars because we thought that was the most permanent kind of love. Then her family moved to Islamabad. Her father, a powerful man with a surgically tight smile, didn't like the distractions of childish friendships. They left without warning. And just like that, she became a story I told myself to sleep. Now here she was again, years later, with sharper cheekbones and quieter eyes. I could see the struggle in her shoulders, she wanted to hug me, but something held her back. We talked like people who had skipped a few chapters. She was studying business administration, of course. I was finishing my degree in fine arts, not the kind of career that impressed family patriarchs, but it was mine. We started meeting often after that. Library sessions turned into tea breaks into late-night walks. I didn't ask for her number, she offered it. I didn't ask if she had someone in her life. She never said. But the silence grew louder the closer we got. Amara was careful with her words. Her laugh came easier when we were alone, and her fingers always lingered a second longer than necessary when she handed me something. I started sketching again because of her. She brought color back into my grayscale world. But there were signs. She always checked her phone twice before answering. When I asked who kept calling, she said, family stuff. Her phone screen had a man's name flash once, Tariq. She swiped it away like it burned her fingers. I should have pushed. Should have asked harder. But I was too caught up in the fantasy of almost happiness. That space between love and possession where everything is soft and glowing, until it isn't. One night, I walked her back to her dorm. The rain was coming down hard, and we stood under a narrow awning, soaked and breathless. She looked up at me, her eyes shining, not with joy, but conflict. If things were different, she whispered, I'd choose you. It gutted me. Because what was stopping her? I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, trying to stitch together all the signs I'd ignored. My heart was screaming what my pride didn't want to hear, I was the secret. I was the soft place she visited between her reality and her responsibilities. A few days later, she disappeared. One text. I'm sorry, Zion. I can't hurt my family. Please understand. Understand? How do you understand someone choosing a cage when you offer them freedom? I didn't reply. I deleted her number. Blocked her on every platform. But her ghost lived in my playlist, in my sketchbook, in every corner of the cafe we used to sit in. I found out she got married from a mutual friend's Instagram story. She was dressed in traditional red, eyes lowered, standing next to a man I didn't know, but somehow hated instantly. Tariq. I tried to hate her. God, I tried. But love isn't a faucet you turn off. It lingers. Even when it rots, it stays. It seeps into your bones. The worst part? I still missed her. I tried to fill the void. Alina came into my life like a bomb, sweet, steady, kind. We went on dates. She listened when I talked about my art, my mom, my small dreams. But she saw through me. You're in love with someone else, she said once, without anger. No, I lied. Yes, she replied, and kissed my cheek like a goodbye. I buried myself in work after that. Long nights painting, sometimes just to feel something. My health started slipping. I chalked it up to stress. Ignored the chest pains, the dizziness. Until one day, I woke up on the floor of my studio, unable to breathe. Hospital. White walls. Machines beeping. Doctors explaining words I didn't want to hear. Heart failure. Undiagnosed. Rare. Fatal, eventually. They said I had months. A year if I was lucky. I laughed when they left the room. It wasn't funny, but what else could I do? I thought of Amara that night. Wondered if she would cry when she found out. If she would say my name to her husband. If she'd wish she had made a different choice. I wrote her a letter. I poured everything into it. My anger. My heartbreak. My truth. But I never sent it. Because even now, knowing death was creeping toward me, I couldn't be the one to break her life apart. Let her live with her choices. Let her feel the silence I was forced to swallow. But fate, it seems, wasn't finished with us. And neither was she. I didn't hear it from her. I found out through someone else's Instagram story. A flickering slideshow of a grand wedding stage, gold drapes, laughter, flower petals caught mid-air. Amara, in deep red bridal wear, looked almost unreal. Like a memory that had chosen to forget me. And beside her, him. Tariq. His arm wrapped tightly around her waist. Her eyes lowered, smile polite, lips sealed shut as if happiness were a chore. I watched it on loop. 30 seconds. Over and over. My breath caught, then twisted, then died a slow death inside my chest. She got married. She didn't tell me. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a lie. Just silence. I waited for hours that night. Maybe she'd say it was a mistake. Maybe she'd tell me she was forced. That it wasn't real. But no message came. No apology. No explanation. Just a void where her voice used to live. I didn't cry at first. Just stared at the screen, numb. Scrolling through comments from people we once shared classrooms with. Mashallah, so beautiful. Power couple. A match made in heaven. Heaven. If that was heaven, then what was I? Leftover purgatory. That night, I smashed my phone against the wall. It shattered like I wished her choices would. But in the mirror, it was my face that cracked more. The kind of fracture that starts behind your eyes and creeps into your soul. I couldn't breathe the next morning. I didn't want to. How do you inhale life when the person you love exhales you like poison? And the worst part? She chose him. She. Choose. Him. This wasn't a kidnapping. No shotgun wedding. No threats. No forced silence. She chose Tariq, the businessman with silk-lined ambition and a smile as sharp as broken glass. Choose status over soul. Choose predictability over poetry. Chose a man her parents could smile beside in public instead of the one who whispered dreams to her in the dark. I started replaying everything. The long walks. The way she leaned her head on my shoulder but never called me her boyfriend. The times I asked her what we were and she'd laugh, why ruin it by labeling? Because you already had a label waiting, didn't you, Amara? Engaged. Promised. Already taken. She was playing both sides. Feeding me hope while preparing to be someone else's bride. I wasn't her secret, I was her emotional crutch. Her guilty indulgence before walking into the prison she called duty. And I, idiot that I am, I believed every gentle word she spoke. The anger came days later. Slow, burning, cold. I didn't want revenge. Not then. I just wanted to disappear. I stopped replying to friends. Ignored calls from my mother. I quit painting. I didn't eat unless my body screamed for it. I walked through life like someone had pulled the plug on gravity, floating but heavy in all the wrong places. And then, weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. From her. It was brief. 3 lines. Zion. I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye properly. I had no choice. Please understand. No choice. What a lie. She had every choice. She had the choice to walk away from me. The choice to marry him. The choice to betray what we had. But the one choice she never made was honesty. And now, with her ring shining in photographs, she dares to say sorry. That's when something inside me snapped, not the kind of rage you see in movies. No fists. No shouting. Just, quiet resolve. A decision that I wouldn't beg for closure. That I wouldn't try to win her back. That I wouldn't let her ghost linger in my ribs like a parasite feeding on what was left of me. But it was too late, wasn't it? The damage had already settled like smoke in my lungs. Even when I tried to move on, she was there. I started dating Alina, soft-spoken, good-hearted, patient. The kind of woman who asked how my day was and actually waited for the answer. And still, when she touched my hand, I flinched. Not because I didn't care, but because my skin still remembered Amara's fingertips. I can't compete with your past, Alina said gently one night. And I shouldn't have to. She was right. So I let her go too. What was left of me wasn't worth giving. One night, unable to sleep, I opened a blank document and tried to write it out. The whole thing. Our story. Our beginning. Our betrayal. The words blurred on screen. I couldn't finish it. Not yet. Instead, I wrote a letter. To Amara. A letter I never sent. You didn't break me, Amara. You taught me that love isn't always loud or violent when it dies. Sometimes, it just fades away, while you're still staring at it, holding your breath, hoping it'll notice. I hope the life you chose brings you everything I couldn't. And I hope one day, when you're lying awake next to a man who doesn't look at you the way I did, you'll remember what we almost had, and it hurts. I sealed the letter and hid it away in my drawer. Maybe one day she'd read it. Maybe not. But for now, I let the betrayal burn quietly beneath my skin. And I tried, God, I tried, to learn how to breathe without her again. When I saw her again outside that bookstore, time didn't just stop, it recoiled. She wore beige, her hair slightly undone, and her eyes, they still had that storm in them. For a second, I thought I imagined her. My mind had a habit of resurrecting her in strangers. But then she said my name. Zion. 2 syllables. 1,000 volts. I should have walked away. Should have smiled politely, given a nod, and kept going. But I didn't. Because even after everything, the sight of her stirred something raw in me, something shameful. She smiled softly, uncertain, as if unsure whether I'd forgive her or spit on the ground. I did neither. Amara, I said. And that was it. The dam cracked. We got coffee that day. A small, dusty place with terrible lattes and no music, just silence and old furniture. She said she liked it because it felt like a memory. She always did speak like a poet when she was uncomfortable. Her hands trembled when she reached for the sugar. Mine trembled too, but I clenched them in my lap. I didn't think I'd see you again, she said, eyes on the chipped table. You weren't supposed to, I replied. My voice wasn't angry. Just tired. I kept tabs on you. Quietly, she said. I saw you had a small gallery showing last year. Your sketches, they're still as beautiful as ever. I didn't know how to respond to that. Praise from someone who left you feels like a slap wearing perfume. She kept talking, about her job at her father's firm, about how busy life had become, how suffocating it was to be perfect all the time. And how silence eats away at a person when they lie down beside someone they don't love every night. She didn't say Tariq's name. But she didn't have to. I didn't ask questions. I just listened, as if absorbing her sadness would lighten mine. And then, like an addict slipping back into addiction, I agreed to meet again. That's how it began. We started meeting weekly. First in public, then in corners no one noticed, quiet parks, empty cafes. We never crossed any lines, physically. But emotionally. We were on a tightrope, and each meeting pushed us further from solid ground. She'd laugh again, genuinely. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me like she did back in university, and my chest would ache. I knew I should stop. But I couldn't. One night, as we sat in my apartment, watching old videos on my cracked laptop, she leaned her head on my shoulder. You know, she whispered, when you stopped answering my texts after I got married, I thought. I thought maybe you'd hate me forever. I did, I said. She lifted her head, startled. But hate is like love, loud and messy. What I feel now is quieter. Do you still love me? She asked, her voice barely above a breath. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because she didn't deserve to hear it anymore. And then, just when the sky between us began to clear, I told her the truth. It was a Tuesday. We were supposed to meet at the usual cafe. She was late, 20 minutes. I sat there, fidgeting with my sleeve, my body aching from fatigue I no longer had the strength to hide. When she arrived, she looked flustered. Said her father had called, warning her not to be seen with me again. Said Tariq's brother had seen us once. They know something's up, she said, brushing hair behind her ear. I looked at her for a long time. Amara, I said, I'm dying. She blinked. Tilted her head, as if she misheard. What? My heart, I said. There's a condition. Rare. Got diagnosed last year. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my parents. Maybe I was hoping it'd go away if I ignored it hard enough. Silence swallowed the room. Her eyes welled instantly. You're lying. I smiled, because part of me wanted to believe that too. How much time, she asked. Less than a year. Could be less than 6 months from now. She covered her mouth with her hand. I looked away. You should go, I said. This was a mistake. Us. All of this. But she didn't move. She just cried, quietly, like a faucet left slightly open. I chose wrong, she said. I should have chosen you. I thought I was protecting everyone, including you. But I only broke things. I didn't respond. Because what do you say to the person who shattered your world, only to show up with glue after the pieces had turned to dust? Days blurred after that. Then weeks. Amara left Tariq. She told her parents. Her father called her a disgrace. Her mother cried. Her friends ghosted her. Tariq filed for divorce almost instantly, no fight, no dignity. And then she showed up on my doorstep with a duffel bag and tear-streaked cheeks. Where else would I go, she asked. I let her in. We didn't fall back into each other. We crawled. Each day was awkward. We were different people now. Scarred. Tired. Cautious. But there was comfort in sharing a toothbrush cup again. I'm laughing over burnt toast. In waking up and seeing her beside me, not as a fantasy, but as flesh and blood. She began working part-time at a local art supply store. I started sketching again, for her. We built something out of ashes. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. Still, part of me never stopped watching the clock. Every laugh felt like a borrowed moment. Every hug had the ache of goodbye stitched into it. And I knew, she was trying to fix what she broke. But the truth? She wasn't doing it for me. She was doing it for herself. To absolve her guilt. To believe she had chosen love in the end. But love isn't a prize for the brave. It's a promise made in the quiet, when no one is watching. And she hadn't kept it when it counted. One evening, we were painting a wall in our tiny apartment, music playing softly in the background. She accidentally splattered yellow on my shirt and burst into laughter. I watched her for a long time. This is what we should have had. Years ago. I wanted to freeze the moment. Bottle it. But I couldn't. Because I'd made up my mind. A few days later, I made breakfast. Her favorite, spinach omelette, hash browns, and mango juice. I watched her eat while I sipped my tea. Thank you for coming back, I said. She smiled. I should have never left. We didn't talk about the end. But she knew. I saw it in her eyes. That night, while she slept, I packed a bag. I left her a letter. The next morning, she woke up to an empty apartment. No trace of me. Just a single envelope with her name and an old playlist on the kitchen counter. In the letter, I told her the truth. That I loved her with everything I had, even after death had cast its shadow. But I couldn't let my final moments be about her redemption. I needed to leave on my terms. Because in life, she had abandoned me. And now, I was giving her something to hold on to. The pain of regret. I never thought of revenge the way movies do, no grand exposé, no public shaming, no violent declarations of triumph. My version of revenge was quieter. It was making her live in the world she chose over me. It was letting her fall in love with me all over again, only to watch it slip through her fingers like sand. It was the truth, raw, unpolished, and irreversible. After I told Amara about my condition, she didn't cry at first. She just sat there, blinking like her world was being unstitched thread by thread. I watched her lips part slightly, but nothing came out. She was used to controlling things, emotions, narratives, appearances, but death. You can't schedule it. Can't manipulate it. Can't delay it with apologies. I don't understand, she finally whispered. I looked away. It's not something to understand, Amara. It just is. But how long? She asked, gripping my sleeve like a child. Maybe months. Maybe weeks. Depends on how much my heart wants to stick around. Her face crumbled then. She buried it in her hands, and I stood there, numb. I had dreamed of this moment 1,000 times, not the illness, but her grief. And now that it was real, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. She wanted to stay by my side after that. Left Tariq. Walked out on the gilded cage she had spent years defending. Her family threatened her, pleaded with her, insulted her. But she didn't care. Let them disown me, she said. Let them choke on their pride. I almost believed her. We moved into a small apartment 2 blocks from the river. It smelled like old paint and fresh bread from the bakery below. The kind of place where real people lived, not heirs, not heiresses, just us. Those days were both the best and the worst of my life. She would make soup on rainy days. Sit cross-legged on the couch and hum while reading aloud to me from her favorite books. She took care of me like it meant something. Like she was rewriting the story in real time. But I knew what this was. It wasn't love. It was guilt with a pretty face. And guilt has an expiration date. I watched her eyes some nights when she thought I was asleep. She wasn't crying. She was staring, calculating, rehearsing. There was something performative in the way she kissed my forehead, like she needed to prove something, not to me, but to herself. That's when I decided. She would get what she wanted, redemption. But it wouldn't save her. She had chosen security over love once. And now, I'd make her live with what it cost. My revenge didn't come with rage. It came with gentle affection. With slow, deliberate honesty. I told her about all the little things she had missed in my life when she left. The time I got accepted into a graduate program and turned it down because I couldn't imagine living without her. The way I kept her scarf for years because it smelled like her shampoo. The way her silence had killed me long before this illness did. She cried often. But never protested. And I let her believe she was fixing it. Let her build her fairy tale around us, this tragic, poetic ending where she finally chooses love, and fate cruelly rips it away. But I wouldn't let her have that comfort. One night, I turned to her as we lay in bed. Do you think this is what love looks like? I asked softly. She turned to face me. Her eyes were red. This? Yes. Maybe not ideal, but it's real. I'm here, Zion. I chose you. No, I said. You didn't. You're just making peace with your mistake. She went still. That's not fair. Isn't it? I whispered. You chose silence. A lifetime of safety. You let me rot alone while you wore red bangles and posed beside your trophy husband. And now that death is knocking, you show up with casseroles and lullabies, expecting to be remembered as the one who stayed. Her face was pale. I sat up, coughing. The pain gripped my chest like iron. She reached for me, but I waved her off. I'm not your redemption arc, Amara, I said. I'm your consequence. The next morning, I was gone. Not dead, just gone. I left while she was sleeping. Packed a single bag. I left my phone, our keys, the letter I had written months ago, and a small wooden box with our memories. I left everything except myself. Because she never got to leave me and then decide when to return. A week later, I got the call. From my lawyer. She came by. I gave her the letter as instructed. I didn't ask what she said. But I imagined her face as she read it. Dear Amara. I loved you. I still do. But love that isn't brave isn't worth dying for. You made a choice. You didn't just break my heart, you unchose me when I had given you everything. I don't care that you were scared. I was too. But I stayed. You left. And now, you want to rewrite it all with a few months of kindness. That's not how life works. You don't get to choose the epilogue if you run from the middle. I'm gone now, not just from the house, but from you. I won't let my final memories be of someone pretending they were here all along. Live your life. Remember me if you want to. But don't idolize me. You didn't love me until I was dying. And that's the tragedy you'll have to live with. Zion. The weeks that followed were the quietest of my life. I stayed in a rented room by the mountains, where the air felt like forgiveness and the nights were colder than I remembered. I didn't tell anyone where I went. Not even Alina, who once offered me her whole heart while I bled for someone else. Some days, I missed Amara's laugh. But most days, I felt peace. I checked the cafe blog once, Zay's Corner, she called it. There were posts about grief, about love, about learning to say, I'm sorry, when it no longer matters. She never mentioned my name, but I saw myself in every sentence. My favorite post ended like this. He was the boy I buried twice, once with my silence, and once in the ground. And if I could have just one more day, I'd tell him not that I loved him, but that I was too afraid to. I closed the tab. That was my victory. Not her ruin. Not her tears. But knowing that for the rest of her life, she would never again say, next time. Because there wouldn't be one. They say when you die, your life flashes before your eyes. That's not true. At least not for me. When I died, it was quiet. No flashing images, no cinematic reel of my happiest moments. Just stillness. And a deep ache, not for life, but for the things left unsaid. I didn't leave Amara a note. People might think that was cruel. But I had already said everything I needed to, just not out loud. I left her with memories, with fragments of the love we shared and the guilt we lived in. And somewhere in all that silence, I hoped she'd find meaning. The last few months we spent together were like a dream I had no right to live. She tried so hard, to stitch our broken timeline into something whole again. She brought me fresh tulips every Friday, made breakfast even when I couldn't eat, and kissed my forehead like it would keep me here a little longer. And part of me wanted to believe it could. But love isn't a cure. It's a mirror. And looking into Amara's eyes, I saw both love and regret tangled together like thorns around a rose. She loved me. Desperately. But not in the way I had wanted to be loved when it mattered most, freely, bravely, without restraint. So I left on my own terms. No beeping machines. No final goodbyes. Just me, walking into the night, leaving behind a world that had already buried me long before my heart stopped. My lawyer delivered everything as I'd planned. The scarf she left in my backpack that rainy day in sophomore year. A USB drive with our playlist, our stupid, sacred playlist, she once called it, full of songs we never danced to. And the letter I had written before she ever came back into my life. The voice recording was short. Honest. Don't let regret become your legacy. If you ever love again, let it be with everything you've got. Don't make them beg for your heart while it's still beating. I didn't know if it would change her. But I hoped it would heal something. Amara came to my grave often. I know because I've seen the way the grass is always flattened beside the headstone, how fresh flowers never wilt for too long. I imagine her talking to me. Telling me about the cafe she opened in my name. About the girl she helped leave a toxic relationship. About how, for once, she made a decision that had nothing to do with her father, and everything to do with her own damn soul. She's not the same woman I fell in love with. And maybe that's the point. She lived. She learned. She wept for the boy she abandoned, and then honored him in ways no apology could ever reach. But death has its own kind of peace. It forgives where the living hold grudges. It sees the heart behind the mistake. And in some strange, divine way, I forgive her. Because she finally understood what I meant when I said love isn't a feeling. It's a choice. And this time, she chose it. Even if I wasn't there to receive it. Sometimes, I imagine another version of us. One where she defied her family. Where she said yes instead of goodbye. Where I didn't die, and we built a small life, quiet, messy, ours. But even in this version, this broken, bittersweet version, I was loved. I remembered. And that's enough. Maybe someday she'll fall in love again. Maybe she'll find someone who sees her the way I did, whole and flawed and terrifyingly beautiful. And maybe she'll finally say, yes, the first time, instead of the last. I hope she does. She deserves that chance. Because in the end, I wasn't just her lost love. I was her wake-up call. And that, in its own way, feels like a kind of immortality. 1 year later, Amara found a sealed envelope tucked inside an old sketchbook of mine, the one I never let her touch. It was labeled, in my handwriting. Only open when you're ready to fall in love again. She stared at it for hours. Fingers trembling. Breath held. And then, with a quiet smile and a tear rolling down her cheek, she whispered. Not today, but maybe one day. And for the first time since my death, she left the envelope unopened, but not unread.